Well, repetition is power. You realize, wow, that is one powerful pillar that I can lean on. We are back with another reflection on the Daily Vedantic. At first I was going to go kapow, 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 and then I upgraded my virtual weapons to something that you don't even want to know how powerful that gun was that I upgraded it to. Virtual. Such an interesting word. Virtual is used to represent that which is not real. Virtual reality. Virtual weapon. And yet, the root of the word is truth. Just something to think about. So, what's today's reflection on? Today's reflection is on this concept within this philosophy called pile driving. This is the colloquial term that Swami will use, but there's actual Sanskrit term for it's the word you would use for driving a pillar into the ground. The force, and you have to bring it up, drop it back in, up, drop it back in, up, drop it back in. The colloquial term is pile driving. And it is a practice within this philosophy that's used often for us. It's almost like forced reflection by a teacher to repeat a concept, set of concepts over and over and over again. Another word for Vedanta, or another term for it, is Sanatana Dharma, which means eternal principles. And the eternal principles might be attach, you lose, detach, you gain. Anything you're attached to, you, by definition, according to this philosophy, you will lose it because you're attached to it. Detach from it, give it some space, create a vacuum, and it comes to you. Or it might be the intellect is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. It might be that which is sweet in the beginning is like poison in the end. That which is like poison in the beginning is sweet in the end. Any of the episodes, you could click on one and it is one of the eternal principles. There are about 25 eternal principles that are repeated over and over and over again. Why are they repeated over and over again? Why is one of the eternal principles around pile driving these concepts? Repetition. Well, repetition is power. It's the number one rule in politics is to not get fancy, not say different things to different audiences at different times. It's to say just a few things over and over and over and over again. It's often why somewhat dull people make for good politicians, is they are able to so easily just say the same things over and over and over and over again. It's quite hard for someone that, out of just curiosity, out of their own entertainment, out of their own selfish desire to keep things interesting, to change things up over and over and over and over again, to keep it interesting for them. But for the teacher, especially when it comes to concepts that you might hear and think deep down, damn, there's something there. But you don't quite know what about that phrase, about that knowledge bomb. You don't quite know or understand the entirety of the concept. And it requires reflection over and over and over again. And that's what this is. This concept or this practice of pile driving is the teacher saying these concepts over and over and over again. Some of those, the ones that I just mentioned, you might pick up on the first pass. And you're like, man, wow. The intellect. Or you could put in wisdom there. Wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. Love is seeing no otherness in the world. Reality is that which persists. You might hear these things and say, damn, I've never heard a definition of love like that. Or I've never heard a definition of wisdom ever. And you reflect on it and say, wow, that hit me. The moment I first heard it kind of stopped me in my tracks. But then there are some nuanced ones. The level 101 ones, and then you've got 201, 301, 401, 501. advanced kind of concepts where you're like, oh, that didn't really speak to me. First time I heard no motive, operate with no motive. Remember thinking like, nah, that's no motive. I think I'm going to go with the sexier ones. Kind of hit me in my tracks or stop me in my tracks. And yet now I think about no motive all the friggin' time. I think about a concept like nothing happens. Make whatever decision you want in that scenario. Even if you think it's like life or death, there's so much import in this decision. I've got to make the right one. And one of the concepts within Vedanta is nothing happens. Doesn't really matter. You hit that insane professional milestone, sell a business for $1 billion. Like my friend and co-investor and I, we're in a bunch of companies together, Justin Kahn, and he openly talks about how not long after he could not get out of bed for days because he was so depressed. Nothing really happens. But that concept of nothing happens, that's something I had to hear maybe 50 times, maybe 100 times before it even triggered a thought, before I even realized, oh, there's something there worth just exploring, reflecting on. So if you hear me repeat various concepts, that is part of the tradition to pile drive. To lift up, drop again, lift up, drop again, lift up, drop again. And use the power of the pillar to drive itself into the ground. Use the power of these concepts. Just put them in the air. And you hear it a third time or a 10th time, 11th time. And as Swami will say often, the penny drops. After a while, the penny drops. If it doesn't drop, or if it just doesn't make sense to you, like no motive or seeing no otherness in the world, just put it back on the shelf. This is a buffet. This philosophy is unique in that there isn't anything that you need to believe within this philosophy. And if you believe one thing, you don't need to believe the rest. You might find 3 useful things out of this philosophy, toss the rest, and that is not only A-okay, that's a success of this philosophy existing. As a stark contrast to the spiritual background that I grew up in within Roman Catholicism, where it's like, no, if you like some of this, you got to believe all of it. And even if you don't like some of it, you got to believe all of it. This philosophy is not that. The phrase of just leave it on the shelf is used often at the ashram. So you don't need to believe all of it. You don't even need to register much of it. Some of these concepts just don't speak to you at a certain stage in life. But maybe the 7th time you hear it, when it's pile driven, you say, oh shit, that's deep. And instead of this surface level pillar, it becomes driven so deep that you start to build a new life around it. Not because of anything that is said, not because of anything that you change, but just because you realize, wow, that is one powerful pillar that I can lean on. But in the beginning, when it's only 2 inches in the ground, it's best not to lean on it. But once it's pile driven, you could build an entire structure of marble around it and the other pile. But once it's deep into the ground, you could build an entire structure around that pillar and all the others that are deep into the ground around it. That is the Vedantic concept of pile driving. That's today's reflection. We will see you next time.